on the shortcut, which questions did we want to see you go over and have questions about? It looks like there's a 1 and 2 definitely. Then there's a tie for 3 and 5, so everyone choose 3 or 5. I think 3 won that one. Right. With number 1, you have to know your exponent rules in order to do this. You can check it in desmos, but you can't say use desmos for this one. You have to do the work. So using our exponent rules, we would divide 2 and 6, subtract each of your exponents. So x to the -4, y to the 5th, z to the 6th. And then combine all of these into one big fraction and make sure you don't have any negative exponents left. So the x would come down, the y and the z would stay up. To give us y to the 5th, z to the 6th over 3x to the 4th.
How did you set up the fraction?
The 1/3 or the
No, the like y to the 5th, z to the 6th.
So these have positive exponents. So that has to stay in the numerator because they're really already in the numerator. This would have to come down because you would take the base and move it and make the exponent positive. And this was already a fraction. So combining each of these, the things in the numerator, 1 with the out front, this and this, things in the denominator, 3 and x to the 4th. Yes.
It's still right if you put the 1 before the y, right?
You can do that. Other questions? Now, anytime you get exponent rules on the SOL, definitely still double check yourself. Use the sliders. I'm going to type in the original with capital X's and Y's. And once I have the original typed in, I'm going to hit add all sliders, change this to 3 different things. I would make them positive just to keep your lives easier. And then type in your final answer. Which was x to denominator. Y to the 5th. And those numbers should be the same. Questions on that? So then in number 2, we have to write the equation of a line that is parallel to the given equation but goes through the point, and they have equations. So I'm going to type in that point first. Type in the given equation. And because I know I need another equation, I'm going to type in my equation of the line, y equals mx plus b. add in all my sliders. And then because this is parallel, the slope has to be the same, so 2. And then I'm going to move my b until it goes through that point. So my equation would be y equals 2x plus 7. If you didn't use your point slope and, if you didn't use point slope there, make sure you're planning to use desmos. Questions on that one? And then for number 3, this is one of your literal equations. You literally solve this for x. So we're trying to get x by itself, get rid of a by adding it to the other side. Get rid of the 5 by dividing it on both sides, so that x equals b plus a over 5 orders. Questions on this?
Could you solve number 2 algebraically?
I'll show you the setup, but I'm not going to solve it completely. You would have to use this, where this is your x1, this is your y1, and this is your m. Make sure names are on your shortcut answer sheet and go ahead and pass those up. 15, you had to find which signs would work for this. So the first one would be greater than or equal to. The last one would just be greater than. 16, if you were doing this on the computer or on the app, it would be a drop-down menu, but you can't do it on paper. So the first one would be down, and the second one would be steeper. For 17, similar. The first one would be 1/2, the second one would be 2 more than. 18, you just needed any of those 2 points. It didn't matter which 2. You shouldn't have more than 2, and you shouldn't have a line. It didn't ask you to draw a line, it just asked you to plot 2 points. Some of them will say form a line, and then on the computer what will happen is you'll put 2 points in, it will magically form a line. $19, if you put this into Desmos, you could look at your graph to find the domain, which would be greater than or equal to 3. 20 and 21, if you put those into Desmos or the calculator to look at the graph, which one has exactly 1, 0 is where it crosses the x-axis once. So g of x and j of x, those functions. And the functions that have an x-intercept of 3, the h of x and the k of x. And then on Monday, 22 through 28, the rest of the packet is due. Do we have any questions we want to see done by hand or in questions on any of those? We're going to go over the last thing you guys need to know for the SOL. So everyone should have these notes. So the last thing we are going to talk about is function notation. This will feel familiar to you because once we get into it, it's really just evaluating. It just looks different. So with function notation, instead of equation y equals 2x minus 8, you'll see f of x equals 2x minus 8. It really one means the same thing. Y equals is more for equations, solving, graphing. F of x is more for functions, input, output type thing. This is read as f of x. So when we evaluate a function for a specific value, you're going to substitute the value in for x. So in example 1, if you see f of 5, that's saying every time I see x, I'm going to put 5 in. And I'm going to simplify. So that would be 1. 12. So I would write that answer as f of 5 equals 12. That's saying when x is 5, y is 12. Or you could just write it as f of x equals 12, which would mean the y value is 12. So either way, you just have to be able to recognize it both ways. So then we're going to do the same thing for part B and part C. Put -1 in for your x's. What would that give us?
6.
And then do the same thing for -3. What would that give us?
3.
Close.
4.
So with all of these problems, you can do it by hand. Some of them are simple enough that you could do that. Some of them get a little bit more complex. You could still do them by hand. You could also do it in a calculator or in desmos. I'll show that. In the calculator, in y equals, I'm going to type in x plus 7. And then I'm going to go into the table, second graph. And I could find each of the x values. So I need 5, -1, and -3. So when x is -3, y is 4. When x is -1, y is 6. And when x is 5, y is 12. And then I would just list each one. You could do the same thing in desmos. So you could do this one of two ways. You could either type in the f of x. It's going to give you a line. You could look at the line. You could not put the f of x and just put the x plus 7. It's going to give you the same line. Again, you could look at it. Or you could go into the table. Go into the gear wheel. Make this a table. It'll give you some values, like -1, I know y is 6. For the other ones, I would just type in and get those answers. Questions? Look at numbers 2 through 6. Which of those do we want to see you go over and have questions about?
4 and 6.
So I'm going to start to set up each one. You choose whether you want to do it by hand in the calculator or desmos, and go ahead and start doing that. either in your calculator, in Desmos, or by hand. Go ahead and simplify the first one.
20.
And the second one.
2.
And the third one.
42.
Do you have questions on any of those? We'll do the same thing for 6.
Negative 13.
For the first one. That might have been right. I may have been thinking of the next one. So it's
The next one is
I don't.
the first one.
First one's what?
23.
Negative 23.
Oh, this is.
Not that either. Could be negative, could be 1. Did we find where we went wrong with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Can you show me about that?
So they would have put negative 3 in for all the x's. The next one?
Negative 11.
That one is right. And the last one.
Negative 9. What?
What did you get?
I said negative. Wait, I said negative 9.
Negative 9.
No. Yeah. Is it negative 9?
Negative 25.
I got
30.
51. It's not that.
It's all of them.
It should be something small.
1.
Yeah.
1.
And this would be
25.
Negative 25
plus 30. So
That's
5
negative
minus
5.
4.
Wait, why is it 5 minus? The first one's negative 12.
Negative 25
Yeah.
plus 30.
It's positive 5. I said negative 5.
Okay. Other questions on that? Questions on 7 through 10?
37.
I'm going to set them up. You can do them in the calculator in Desmos by hand.
13.
And the second one.
10.
Did you guys say the same thing?
No.
Or two different?
I said 10. She said 10. He said 1.
It should be 10, because this would be 1 plus 9. And then the last one?
9.
9.
Have any questions on those, discrepancies on those? Okay. 10, if you're doing this in the calculator, to get to the absolute value bar is alpha window, that first one. In Desmos, it's just there. All of these should give you positive answers because everything is inside the absolute value. So if you get a negative, double check that. What would that first one be?
12.
Yes. The second one?
56.
And the last one?
12.
Yes. Any questions on how this works so far? Look at 11. In this example, anthropologists use the length of certain bones of a human skeleton to estimate the height of a living person. One of these bones is the femur. To estimate the height in centimeters of a female with a femur length of x, the function h of x equals 61.41 plus 2.32x can be used. So we first have to find h of 46. So that part's the same as what we were just doing. Put 46 in for x. What would that be?
Is a decimal.
Point, what was that?
13.
So then the first part is like normal, but the second part is asking what does this mean? So we'll do that in two parts. What does the 168.13 mean? What does that represent?
The height is
Can you give peace to us?
So that's her height in centimeters. What about the 46?
the length of the
So not only being able to calculate it, but also relaying the context of whatever the word fucking means. Alright, then look at 12. 12 is doing the same thing but on a graph. So you're given f of negative 4. That's saying when x is negative 4, what is your y value? When x is negative 4, what's your y value? So you could leave it like this, or put f of x equals to either or. F of 0, what would that be? 0. F of 2,
-2.
yes. And f of 5,
1.
positive or negative?
Negative.
How are you solving?
I'm confused.
So it's not really solving, if you're reading the graph. When x is -4, you're looking at when x is -4 and finding your y value.
So the values you just plotted are y?
Hmm.
The ones you just put dots on are y?
That's x and y, but
But you only need y?
for this, yes. Alright, go on to the next page. The next page is doing the same thing we were previously doing, but instead of saying f of this number, it gives you the domain and wants you to find the range. You're doing the exact same thing. So because we're given these domain values, they're x's, we're putting them in for x. So I would set each one up. You could do this algebraically or in the calculator or by hand. F of 4 equals 4 minus 5. F of 6 equals 6 minus 5. And then the last one, f of 8 equals 8 minus 5.
Wait, what did you do for f4? Oh, okay.
So the first one would be
-1.
-1. The second one,
1,
1. And the third one, 3.
3.
And then because of the way this was given to us in curly brackets in that set, our answer has to be in the same format. But least to greatest, so that would be -1, 1. So this is really the same, you just write the answer different. Questions there? Any other questions on this page you want to see you go over and have questions on? 11.
10.
Those are both the same, so we'll just do 11. It's just backwards. They're both really the same, not just backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and start setting that up. You either do that in Desmos in the calculator or by hand. What would that first one be?
-4.
-4. And then the next one?
2.
2.
And the next one?
5.
So when we write out our final answer, what would that look like?
-4, 2, 5, curly brackets.
Go on to the next page. So all the problems we've done so far, you've been given x and had to find y, and now we're going to switch it. The beginning looks the same as the first page. Ignore that. So now we have f of x equals, that is our y. We are given y and now have to find x, and you have to be able to recognize what you're given and what you're solving for. So in part A, I'm going to set these up algebraically and then show you how you would do these in desmos in the calculator. So if I have this equals -5, I could change f of x to be y, just to make it less confusing. Because you don't want to put that in for f of. And then because this is y, I'm just going to rewrite it as -5 equals x plus 7. And now I'm just solving for x. How would I do that?
Subtract 7.
So that x equals,
-12.
and you could leave it like that, or you could put in f of -12 equals -5. So I'm going to set up the rest of them. We already changed the y, so I'm not going to do that. But this would be 0 equals x plus 7. And 10 equals x plus 7. What would be
7.
positive or negative? Negative 7, because we would have been subtracting. And then for C,
3.
do we have questions on any of those? Put that into your calculator if you don't already have it. And then, go back into your table. And it's going to be very similar like looking for the x's, except now you're looking for the y values. You're looking at the y values when y is -5, when y is 0, when y is 10. In what I have right now, I see when y is 10, that would be 3, and I'll write it down. For the 0 and -5, I just have to go backwards. When y is 0, x is -7. When y is -5, x is -12. And you could do it that way. In desmos, it becomes kind of a guessing game. So, they always give you 5 points. If your points aren't up there, you can't put in y values, but you can put in x values, which is why it becomes guessing. So I know that this is going up by 1, so if I do 3, that should give me when y is 10. But then to get 0 and -5, I have to go backwards, and then I just kind of start guessing. Let's say I think it's somewhere beyond -2, like maybe -5. Okay, close, but not really. I can try -8. That would pass the number, so I know I'd have to go to -7 to get my 0. And then you do the same thing for -5. If I had to guess, I know it's something beyond -7, so let's say -15. Okay, that's too far. That's closer. So you would just have to play around with it in order to get those correct answers. Yes. Questions on the calculator or desmos? Are there any other questions we want to see 2 through 6 on that page? y equals, and then change each y value. So 7 equals 3x squared plus 7. So if you want to solve this like a regular problem, you can, but there's something in there that we haven't talked about, which is solving by square roots. So my best bet would be to put this into your calculator or desmos and find when x is 7. Sorry, when y is 7. There's actually going to be 2 answers for some of these. So somewhere in your graph, if you are about right here, you'll see that there are 2 places when y is 82. There are 2 places when y is 34. Just one when y is 7. Because this is your vertex, and then your parabola is going up, and it's symmetric on both sides. So you would list both of these for 82, -5 and 5. In curly brackets, since they're both. Since there's 2, so and then for 34, -3 and 3. And then for when y is 7, just 0. So be on the lookout for problems like that, where they're quadratics and they're giving you y values, because you'll have 2 x's.
Do you have to have both?
Because just one isn't the correct answer. It falls at both places. Questions there? So this is what it would look like algebraically. You would solve it. You would subtract, get 0 equals, this one probably wasn't the best one to try that with. But what happens here is you take the square root of both sides. In this case, the square root of 0 is 0. But when you get to the other ones, so let's say this one in green, what is that? My brain is funny. 34 minus 7. So here, when we take the square root of this, it will be 3, but I briefly touched on this when we talked about simplifying square roots, that when we simplify, we're only looking at the positives, but there is a positive and a negative version of this. Because -3 times -3 would also give you positive 9. So you have to know that and do that for each one. So you could, but you have to remember that part. Other questions? Go on to the next page. The graph at 7 is the same graph, but now we have y values instead of x values. So this is saying when y is -2, what is your x value?
2.
Say that again.
2.
Not quite. So when y, I'm sorry, I was looking at x.
1 and
So yes, when y is -2, x is 2. C is going to have 2 places, and one of them you may have to make a decimal. What about when y is 4?
2.
Are there any others there we want to see you go over?
Where is it?
The one that has 2.
Yeah.
C.
It says 2 and
Say it again.
it's really like a decimal.
So when y is 2, one of them is a whole number, -4. And then the other one, you could just make up a decimal, so like 0.8.
If we have like decimals and value on SOL, is it going to count as wrong?
So I'm going to say if you had decimals like that, it would tell you between 2 numbers or thing. But I'm going to say you're most likely going to get like whole numbers unless it's supposed to be a decimal, not on a graph. Okay. And then finally look at numbers 8 through 13, very much like what we were just doing and previous to that, but now you have your range and have to find your domain. Any of those we want to see you go over and have questions about.
No, but I have a question. How do you tell the difference from when you're supposed to be looking at the y to when you're supposed to be looking
Look at what's given. So if you see f of x equals, that's y. If you see f of some number, that's x. Other questions? You guys do have a Delta Math on this. The last Delta Math of the year that's due on Friday. You and the domain and range that's also due on Friday. So you have those previous. You could work on TestNav, JLabs, which are due next week. Your 8-ball packet, your math gap packet. I still have the practice quizzes. Be working on something.